Every story needs a hero and a villain, and sometimes not in that order. Sometimes we like sports because we like rooting against someone just as much as you like rooting for someone. And that can be a powerful emotion. That can be a powerful driver of despising somebody, hating somebody, just flat out not being a fan of somebody and wanting to see them fail. Now, is that a super cynical, somewhat petty way to operate as a college football fan? Absolutely. 100%. Unequivocally, yes. It is a ridiculous situation, spot to be in, way to view the sport. But I'm not here to pretend like that doesn't exist, because it does. And I think who the hero is in the story is up for just as much interpretation sometimes as much as the villain is. And that's what makes sports fun, is that who I might view as the hero, you might view as the villain. It's not a linear, you know, I I root for Batman and you root for Mr. Freeze. It's up to interpretation, open to interpretation. And I think you see villains come and go in the sport. And I think for a lot of people in college football, Jim Harbaugh was a bit of a villain. Not just because of the sometimes outlandish comments from the guy, like Jimmy Peasoff is a guy who sits on your shoulder and tells you don't have to go work out. I'm like, are you okay, man? But then also you get into the situation where they're super successful last year. And if there is one thing the American public can both really appreciate, get behind, and then also tear down and learn to hate, it is super successful. Jim Harbaugh, undeniably, super successful in 2023. But going back into that kind of villain role, there's questions of how you got to be super successful. Is it because you started a very elaborate, well, the jury's still out on whether he started a very elaborate sign stealing operation that coincided with your resurgence and domination in the sport in 2023. All of those things combined lead to Jim Harbaugh, and Nick Saban is in that same boat too, of to a large portion of the college football world, a villain, a guy who is super successful, doesn't necessarily concern himself with being the most compassionate person, the most relatable person, the most easygoing, understandable and relatable person. He goes about his business and is super successful in the face of an ever-changing world around him. And again, the American public likes a success story until it doesn't. And I don't think it's unfair to say that maybe Nick Saban wasn't the most well-liked villain in college football. But to the hundreds of thousands and millions of Alabama fans, Nick Saban is the hero, just like to the hundreds of thousands and millions of Michigan fans, Jim Harbaugh is the hero. But Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh are gone. So who is are the college football villains in 2024? Who are the people that it's fun to root against? Who are the people that have dug their own grave, so to speak? Who are whether it's players, whether it's coaches, universities, programs as a whole, who are the villains? And I think one of them I'm clouded by. I think it's important to admit your biases. I dislike Dabo Swinney. I think everything about the Clemson football program is about Dabo Swinney. And I don't like that. But I think there is a kind of corny, almost like Dabo Swinney's playing a character. I don't ever find Dabo Swinney super genuine, to tell you the truth. I think he's kind of in that same like Russell Wilson, where he's playing a character of what he thinks a college head coach is supposed to say and do and think and feel. And that's what guides him. I think Russell Wilson is the type of like he's. I don't think he's ever genuine. I think he's like, this is what an NFL quarterback is supposed to think, say, do, and feel and operate. So that's how I'm going to do it. Like, well, just be you, dude. And that's how I feel about Dabo Swinney. So that one might be a personal one for me. But Dabo Swinney, I think, to a somewhat larger section of the college football landscape, is a villain because, one, he was super successful. But then you start to slide off that mountaintop a little bit, I guess a lot. And all you've done since you slipped off that mountaintop is bitch about how people didn't appreciate that you were at the mountaintop. Like, you complained about the standard being set when you're the one who set the standard. Doesn't make any sense to me. I think Dabo Swinney is one option. There are two others that I think sort of jump out as the villain. I think, and this isn't one of the two, I think to a lesser extent, Kirby Smart won, because I think there's a big section of people who believe that, like, if you wear a visor, you shouldn't be trusted. Kirby Smart, big visor guy, all right? It's either hat or nothing to a lot of people, visor guys, but then also very successful, pretty brash about their success and how they operate, and is somewhat in that similar Nick Saban vein. I think Brian Kelly's somewhat in that group as well. Now, I don't think he's one of the two. I think Brian Kelly maybe is a little closer to being in that category of villain, because he's never reached that mountaintop that Nick Saban and Jim Harbaugh and Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney have all reached. He's never been there, but somewhat in the same, like, remember the videos, the memes that came out of him being as red-faced as you can possibly be, screaming at a player. Also, I don't know that he gets enough hate for, like, a person died under your watch, and that's a big deal. And nobody really ever talks about that anymore because it's been a while. But I think Brian Kelly is viewed somewhat disingenuous, but also acts as if he has been to the mountaintop and hasn't been to the mountaintop. And I think LSU, being the LSU coach, somewhat puts you in that camp to begin with, right? Like, there's a certain subsection of college football fans just like, I'm going to hate who the LSU coach is. And in past history, somewhat justifies that. I don't know that anybody hates Ed Orgeron, right? Like, it was just like you put some cayenne pepper in a cement mixer, and that was that dude's voice, and I'm here for it. But Brian Kelly, Nick Saban, Les Miles, not exactly the most popular folks of all time. So I think those two are kind of teetering on that edge. But I think there are two people that really come to mind. One is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma under not great circumstances, and right, wrong, or indifferent, those fans didn't take it the greatest and didn't appreciate it. And that legend sort of started to grow because it was somewhat viewed as, you're leaving Oklahoma because they're going to the SEC and you don't think you can hack it. So you're going to go to USC and try to get away from the competition. But now USC is joining the Big Ten. And so, it's poetic justice. And also, you are viewed as this wonderkind and this offensive genius, but your defenses have traditionally been dreadful. And at some point, you're going to have to figure that out. You get the Heisman Trophy winner as your quarterback, but then that guy's sitting in the stands crying on his mama's boobie. Lincoln Riley is not a popular figure and has not played that very well I think should be. He's a young guy who is really bright offensively, and I don't think is really all that afraid to say what he's really thinking. Now that he kind of BS his way out of Oklahoma, out the back door, yeah, he did. But I think he's somewhat genuine and honest sometimes. but that has been to his detriment. And so I think Lincoln Riley is in that camp of folks who it could be viewed as the villain in college football in 2024. And then the last one, I think, is quickly becoming and the most apt to embrace that moniker. I think Deion Sanders is interested in securing the role of the villain, and for a couple of reasons. One, because we've talked about you don't get to be the villain in sports unless you are either A, incredibly boisterous when you haven't earned it. Talking you're kind of like LeVar Balls. But then also, LeVar Balls sounds like an English. Look, you're LeVar Ball types. But then secondly, you get to play that villain role when you've been really successful. So I think Deion Sanders is interested in both. He's interested in being really boisterous and also being really successful. And if there's anybody kind of built to accept and embrace the role of being the villain, I think it's Deion Sanders, who is unconcerned with what the public perception of him is. Now, I think at some point he might be concerned with what that perception is if it starts to affect recruiting, etc. But when you are tweeting at college athletes or parents saying, my son's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft next year, what's your son going to be? You are embracing, and I think that's just who Deion is. And so I don't have, like, I can't run him down for who you are as a person, I don't really think. But that's just who he is. That's what he's always been. And so when you have no qualms and you're not worried about being viewed favorably or being the nice guy or whatever, if you're solely focused on winning, and I don't know that he is. I have continually contended, I think, that Deion Sanders is in this for Deion Sanders, not for Colorado and not for the enrichment of young African-American football players or anything like that. I think Deion Sanders is in this for Deion Sanders, but that's neither here nor there. I think he is apt to embrace the role of being the villain. I think he kind of wants to be the villain of college football. And I think you should consider that you want him to be that villain. That if there is somebody that you want to dislike, that you want to root against, that you want to see fail, I think he's okay with holding that role, because it's that sort of like Jack Sparrow, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of, but you have heard of me. I think there's some of that in Deion Sanders. And I don't think Dabo Swinney wants to play the role of villain. I don't think Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly, Kirby Smart want to play the role of the villain. I think Kirby might be okay with it a little bit more. I think Deion Sanders is like, I want you. It fuels me that you hate me, that you want to see me succeed. I get up in the morning, and when my feet touch the ground, all 8 of my toes touch the ground, what gets me out of bed is the fact that there are people rooting against me and I have to prove them wrong. That's the moniker, that's the mantra that I think Deion Sanders operates with. And that can be a powerful motivator. That can be a reason to get you out of bed and to want to succeed, to rub it in people's faces. But I don't think you can create that heel turn and become a babyface once you've really embraced who that is. Like, if that is you, if that is the role you want to play and embrace, there isn't really a turn back around to like, oh, you know what? No, like I don't think. And one of the things that drives me nuts is every athlete and every coach now uses the nobody believes in us. Like Baker Mayfield for damn near like a decade now. Nobody believed in me. Nobody wanted me. You were the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. You were the number 1 pick. You won the Heisman Trophy. Nobody believes in me. Well, not anymore. But out of the 252 players the Cleveland Browns could have selected, they chose you. Or Georgia football when they won their back, like nobody believed in us. You were number 1 for 38 straight weeks. Nobody thought we could do it. Yeah, they did. You were the number 1 seed. What the hell? So that drives me nuts that You can't come back around if you embrace it motivates me because you want to see me fail. You then can't. Nobody believed in us. Well, yeah, no kidding. Because you told us you wanted us to not believe in you, bro. But I think Deion Sanders really enjoys being in that position. And I don't think it's an act. I don't think it's a game. I don't think it's I want to be the bad boy of college football or anything like that. I think he's just being Deion, which I can appreciate. It's just, don't be surprised and don't play certain cards if it blows up in your face, 2, you fail, or 3, it doesn't go exactly according to plan like you wanted it to. Once you've embraced that villain card, there are other cards you can't drop for why things didn't go your way or why you weren't successful. If you pick up and play that card, you've played it. And I think Deion Sanders is interested in and wants to play the villain card. And we'll see how that goes for him. That'll do it for today's episode of the Daily Huddle. Appreciate you making us a part of your day, however it is, wherever it is you're doing so. If you are watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Make sure you're getting all the great college football content that's coming out of Saturday Glory. If you are listening on a podcast feed, drop a 5-star review. It goes a long way in helping out the channel. I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Daily Huddle here on Saturday Glory.